There are show-offs, and then there's Karen. She didn't just drive a Lamborghini. She drove the Lamborghini, bright yellow, loud as a jet engine, and obnoxiously shiny even under cloud cover. It wasn't just a car, it was a rolling ego, a four-wheeled attention magnet. Every morning, you could hear her rev it 3 blocks away just so everyone knew she was leaving for her yoga class. Every evening, she'd idle in front of her house for a full 5 minutes, engine growling like a dragon with indigestion, while she adjusted her designer sunglasses and waited for someone, anyone, to acknowledge her presence. And oh, she loved to talk about it. I didn't buy it, she'd say with a smug chuckle. I earned it. Not everyone can handle the kind of power this baby has. As if she'd ever driven it past 40 in our quiet suburban cul-de-sac. She moved into the neighborhood about a year ago, bought one of the biggest homes on the block, and within a week had taken over the HOA board. No one even voted. She just declared it, printed business cards, and held a meeting where only she spoke. Karen was that kind of person, the self-appointed queen of the street, a dictator with a manicure and a purse that probably cost more than my motorcycle. I kept my distance. It was easier that way. I'd nod when I passed her during morning walks, maybe wave half-heartedly if she was already looking. I had no interest in conflict. My home sat a few lots down, behind a wide electric gate that opened up to a long driveway, private, secure, and blessedly out of reach of most neighborhood nonsense, until she noticed the tank. It wasn't a battle tank, not really. It was an old surplus armored vehicle, more for collecting and restoration than anything else. I'd bought it years ago at auction, fully legal, road registered, and something of a project/conversation piece. It sat in my backyard most of the time, only coming out for parades or veteran events. I wasn't some doomsday prepper, just a guy who appreciated history, armor plating, and the occasional diesel-fueled adventure. The first time she saw it was during a Memorial Day parade when I'd driven it through town. She'd actually smiled. Sort of. I remember her saying, "Oh wow, that's big," with a twitch in her eye that didn't quite reach amusement. After that, she never mentioned it again. But she must have told herself that I was just some eccentric weirdo playing dress-up with military toys. In her world, everything had to be flashier, louder, and more expensive than everyone else's. She bragged constantly about her investments and how her car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a statement. What kind of statement? No one knew. But she certainly wasn't humble about it. And God forbid anyone park too close to it. Please respect the space my car needs, she'd say in showy emails, which she sent out every week like propaganda leaflets. I will not be held responsible for any dings or scratches caused by your inferior vehicles. I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't looking for war, but I noticed more than once how she used the Lambo to assert her territory, parking slightly over neighbors' driveways, blocking access to mailboxes, even leaving it idling in front of the community park entrance. She'd wave it off like it was cute. Oh, it's just a Lambo problem, she'd laugh. But the worst part wasn't the car. It was the attitude, the way she talked to people like they were hired help rather than neighbors. She made snide comments about house paint colors, front yard decorations, and garden gnomes. She told the Wilsons their RV had brought down property values and actually tried to get the Patel family fined because their kids left bikes out overnight. She tried it with me once. It was during one of her unannounced HOA inspections. I caught her halfway up my driveway, taking pictures of my garage with her phone. "Ooh, not allowed past the gate," I said, stepping outside. She turned, not startled in the least. "I'm just documenting potential violations. A private property," I reminded her. "I'll call the sheriff if you come back here without a warrant." She pursed her lips. "Fine, but just so you know, your yard art," she meant the tank, "is really aggressive. Not very neighborly." I didn't respond. I just let the gate close behind me. From that day on, she seemed to ignore me, which suited me fine. Until, of course, the day she decided my gate was a fine place to park her precious Lamborghini. It was a Saturday, the neighborhood buzzing with people preparing for the annual block party Karen had forced everyone to agree to. I was planning to leave early that morning, head out to a military memorabilia show in the next county. But when I got to my driveway, I saw it, her obnoxious yellow Lambo, parked sideways, completely blocking my gate. I stood there for a full 10 seconds, stunned, Then I reached for my phone. I already knew how this would go. Karen had just made the worst mistake of her entitled little life. It was 8:14 a.m. when I first saw the Lamborghini parked across my gate like it owned the place. Bright yellow, chrome rims, low enough to scrape a speed bump into gravel. It sat there like a smug cat, sprawled out across my driveway entrance with zero shame. I blinked once, twice, trying to convince myself I wasn't seeing what I was seeing. But there it was, blocking my only way out, daring me to do something about it. I walked up to the gate, hands on my hips, jaw tight. There wasn't a note, no text, no explanation. Just Karen's ridiculous supercar angled across my gate like it was some kind of red carpet. I could see the faint dust on its windshield and the unnecessary engine cover she always left cracked open to show off the custom exhaust. I called her, straight to voicemail. I texted, me. Hey Karen, your car is blocking my gate. I need to leave this morning. Can you move it? No response. I gave it 5 minutes, pacing in my driveway while sipping coffee and trying to keep my blood pressure down. She had to have known she parked in front of someone's gate. My gate. The sign was literally right there. Private drive, do not block. Not to mention the cameras that had recorded her doing it. I pulled up the footage on my phone and watched the clip. 7:53 a.m. Karen pulls up in her banana-colored ego machine, gets out without even glancing back, and walks off down the street. High heels, handbag, and oversized sunglasses like she was late for a Vogue photo shoot. So this wasn't an accident. She knew what she was doing. I walked to the end of the driveway, inspecting the car. No keys inside, doors locked. Parking brake on, of course. That morning was important. I had plans. I was scheduled to display my armored personnel carrier. Yes, the tank, and a veteran charity event a few counties over. People were coming to see it. There were kids, veterans, organizers, all expecting me to show up with the machine I had spent months restoring. And now, thanks to Karen's complete disregard for common decency, I was stuck, trapped on my own property. I headed down the sidewalk, following the direction she had walked. The HOA block party was being set up a few streets over, and I had a good guess that she'd be there directing everything like she was General Karen of suburbia. Sure enough, there she was, standing under a white event tent with a clipboard, barking orders at a poor teenager trying to hang streamers on a fence. I walked straight up to her, calm but firm. Karen, I said, you parked in front of my gate. I need to leave, now. She turned slowly, lowered her sunglasses, and looked at me like I'd just asked her for gas money. It's just for today, she said. The street's a bit crowded. You'll survive. I stared at her. You blocked my driveway. Well, temporarily parked in front of your gate, she said with exaggerated air quotes. There's a difference. I'm the event coordinator today. I needed a spot. I exhaled slowly. I have somewhere to be. I already texted you. She waved a dismissive hand. Oh, I don't check my phone when I'm managing events. You'll be fine. Can't you just wait until after the party? It's not like you actually need to go anywhere. I felt my jaw clench. I do actually. I have an appointment out of town, and you're preventing me from leaving my own property. Karen rolled her eyes and turned back to her clipboard. It's just a car. Move it yourself if it's that serious. I blinked. Are you giving me permission to move your Lambo? That got her attention. She turned back around sharply. Touch my car and I'll sue. Yeah, there it is, I muttered. She crossed her arms, smug. Oh, look, if you'd planned better, maybe you wouldn't be stuck. I'm not moving it. I'm already parked. The party's starting. You can wait. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. She was done listening. In her mind, she'd won. She had the more expensive car, the louder voice, and the imaginary title of Hey Royalty. I was just the quiet neighbor with the weird tank thing in the backyard. She forgot one very important detail. I nodded once. Okay. And I walked away. The walk back to my house felt different. Less about retreat and more like strategy. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, resolved. If she thought she could just park wherever she pleased and get away with it, she was about to learn otherwise. Back inside, I went through my routine. Changed clothes. Pulled on my boots, grabbed the key ring that only had one tag on it, tank. Then I headed out back, where my pride and joy sat under a tarp, waiting patiently. I checked the tires. Fuel, lights, controls, everything was in order. I climbed inside, closed the hatch, and started her up. The beast roared to life, a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through the ground like a prehistoric creature waking up. The birds scattered. A car alarm went off 2 houses down. Somewhere, a dog started barking. I turned the turret, not that I needed it, and guided the tank toward the front gate. Karen wanted a show. She was about to get one she'd never forget. The rumble of the engine echoed through the neighborhood like thunder rolling through a canyon. My armored personnel carrier, technically not a tank by military standards, but close enough, was crawling its way toward the front gate, shaking the gravel and rattling windows as it moved. It wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. The power behind the thing was obvious with every grinding movement of its treads. As I rolled toward the front of my house, a few neighbors peeked out of their windows. A kid across the street dropped his popsicle. A guy walking his golden retriever stopped mid-step, mouth open as he took out his phone to start recording. The noise alone was enough to turn heads, but when they saw what was making the noise, well, let's just say I was no longer the weird guy with the thing in the backyard. I was now the guy with the tank who was clearly on a mission. I inched the vehicle forward until the full front was facing my driveway gate, and the bright yellow Lambo still blocking it. There it was, parked like a trophy Karen had forgotten she didn't win. Its low frame gleamed in the sun, hood reflecting back the sky like a mirror. The car screamed money, pride, and ego. But right now, it was also a barrier, and that made it my problem. I opened the hatch and stood up, half out of the tank, scanning the crowd beginning to form at a distance. Neighbors had started gathering on the sidewalks, murmuring and pointing. I even saw a few with lawn chairs, as if this was scheduled neighborhood entertainment. I couldn't blame them. This was more action than our sleepy suburb had seen in years. Then I spotted her. Karen. Foreign. She was marching toward the driveway, high heels stabbing at the concrete like she was about to host a fashion show instead of a confrontation. Her sunglasses were pushed up on her head now, arms swinging dramatically as she tried to make a scene out of nothing. "Oh, what are you doing?" she screamed. I didn't answer right away. I just revved the engine gently. The sound wasn't threatening, but it was unmistakably powerful. Karen pointed at the Lambo like she expected me to forget it was there. "You better not touch my car." I turned off the engine for a moment so she could hear me clearly. Karen," I said evenly, "you blocked my gate after I asked you not to. I have somewhere I need to be. You refused to move your car." "I was coordinating the event," she snapped. "You knew about the block party. It's one day. A 1 day or 1 hour doesn't matter," I said. "This is private property. You're trespassing. I gave you a warning." She stomped toward the car and placed herself between it and the tank. "If you so much as scrape it, you told me to move it myself," I reminded her. I took that as permission. Her jaw dropped. That was sarcasm. I noted. Doesn't change the facts. She stood frozen for a moment, mouth working but no words coming out. It was like her brain had short-circuited under the pressure of not being in control. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in public, and especially not by someone calmly explaining her own mistakes to her in front of a dozen onlookers. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. "You blocked my gate," I said. "You blocked my gate," I said. "You caused this. Move your car. Now." But instead of moving, she doubled down. "You're not serious," she said. "We're not actually going to drive that thing forward." I didn't answer. She folded her arms. "Do it, then. I dare you." I stared at her. The crowd went silent. She stepped aside, but only slightly, still hovering close, thinking maybe she could bluff her way through this. I turned the engine back on. The rumble returned, louder now, that I was only feet from the Lambo. The metal beast vibrated beneath me, steady and sure, so I gave it a small nudge forward, just enough that the edge of the tread kissed the pavement right behind her rear bumper. Karen screamed. She leapt away, arms flailing, yelling something about lawsuits and insurance and how this was going to ruin me. I stopped the tank. "You've got one last chance to move it," I said. Nothing. She didn't move. So I did. Oh. The first sound was surprisingly delicate. Just the soft crunch of carbon fiber cracking. Then came the thud of weight shifting, followed by the unmistakable shattering of luxury glass and metal giving way to steel. The tank crawled forward, slow, controlled, but unstoppable. The Lambo's alarm went off, screaming in protest, but it was too late. The front bumper disappeared under the weight of the tread. The hood buckled, windshield splintered, and a symphony of twisted metal filled the air as I rolled forward without hesitation. Karen stood there screaming, voice shrill, hands clutched at her hair. The crowd gasped. Phones were everywhere now, recording every inch of the scene. I rolled over the car until it was a crushed, smoking shell of what used to be a $300,000 statement of ego. Then I stopped, shifted into neutral, and popped the hatch again. Karen was still shrieking, now yelling at neighbors to call the police, call her lawyer, call someone. But nobody moved. They were too busy watching. Some were smirking, a few were laughing, and I was calm, because I knew exactly what I was doing, and Karen had no idea what she'd started. The silence that followed the crunch of her Lambo was louder than any engine, even with the car alarm still wailing like a dying banshee and Karen screaming herself hoarse. The whole street seemed to pause in stunned disbelief. You could practically hear every neighbor's heart skip a beat. Phones clutched tightly in their hands as they recorded what had to be the most entertaining, each outstanding HOA showdown in suburban history. Karen stumbled toward the wreckage like she was approaching a crime scene. Her crime scene. Her hands were shaking. Her designer heels, which had somehow survived the shock of her own ego collapsing, clacked unevenly across the driveway. Her jaw moved like she wanted to say something, but all that came out was a weird choking noise, half sob, half rage. You psycho... She shrieked at the top of her lungs, finger jabbing toward me like she was a prosecutor mid-trial. Do you know how much that car cost? I stayed where I was, half sitting in the tank, arms crossed casually over the hatch rim. The smell of scorched rubber and crushed dreams lingered in the air. Yes, I said flatly. About $320,000. Give or take a few thousand for the obnoxious rap. The crowd of neighbors was growing by the second. Lawn chairs had multiplied like mushrooms. Someone passed around lemonade. One guy brought popcorn. Kids sat on the curb wide-eyed, their parents not even trying to cover their ears anymore. I'll call the police. Karen screamed at no one in particular. He destroyed my car. This is criminal damage. He's insane. She turned to her phone, frantically tapping on the screen. But she must have realized something, and every inch of what had just happened was caught on my security cameras. From her ignoring my text to her telling me, on camera, to move it yourself, Karen suddenly paused mid-swipe, the reality of the situation crashing down harder than the tank on her hood, Don't worry, I said calmly. I'll get your day in court. You're going to need it. I'll sue you for everything you've got. She spat, voice trembling. That tank's not even legal. You're going to jail. It's registered, I said. Street legal, insured. And kept on my private property. Want to see the documents? Karen didn't reply. She just turned away, clutching her phone with a death grip and muttering curses under her breath. That's when the sirens showed up. 2 black and white units rolled in with the kind of bored professionalism you get in the suburbs on weekends. Both officers stepped out, one younger, one older, both wearing the expression of men who've seen too many domestic disputes over fence lines and barking dogs. But today was different. Today, there was a Lamborghini, flattened like a pancake across a private driveway, and a tank parked on top of it. The younger cop took one look at the scene and did a full double take. Yep, said the older one, who clearly recognized me. Hi, Jack. Hey. Officer Nolan, I said, nodding from the hatch. Karen ran up to them, waving her arms. You need to arrest him. He destroyed my car. Look at it. Look. Officer Nolan held up a hand. Ma'am, we're going to ask you to calm down. Calm down? He ran over my Lamborghini with a war machine. Nolan looked at me again. Jack, you mind giving us a quick rundown? I nodded. She blocked my gate. I asked her multiple times to move it. She refused. I asked, told me to move it myself. So I did. He sighed and scribbled something in his notepad. You have video, multiple angles, timestamped, including her telling me to handle it myself. Karen's jaw dropped. That was sarcasm. That's not legal permission. The younger officer blinked. Ma'am, were you parked on his private property? Karen hesitated. It's a driveway. It's his driveway, I said. A fully enclosed, legally marked. I even have security signage posted. Want to see it? Officer Nolan already knew the answer. We've responded to this address before, he said to his partner. A driveway's private, not public right-of-way. She was trespassing. Karen looked like someone had slapped her with a legal textbook. That's absurd. I'm the HOA lead. Sure, Leroy. I can park. You can't park on private property without permission, Nolan said, his tone clipped. HOA doesn't override basic property law. Karen let out a sound somewhere between a whimper and a growl. Then came the part that finally broke her. Nolan turned to her, voice calm. Oh, ma'am, based on the evidence, you'll likely be cited for trespassing, obstruction, and illegal parking. As for the vehicle damage, that'll be a civil matter. But based on the circumstances and recorded permissions, the liability may not go the way you think. You're taking his side, she hissed. We're taking the side of the law, he said flatly. Karen burst into tears. Like full-on mascara running, shoulders shaking, loud sniffling tears. She dropped onto the nearest patch of curb like a villain in a soap opera, realizing her plan had completely imploded. The crowd stayed silent, awkwardly entertained. I slid out of the tank and walked toward the officers, offering them a flash drive. All the footage is on here. I'll email it too, if needed. Appreciate it, Nolan said. As they began filing their report, Karen stood up and shouted, I'm calling my lawyer. You'll regret this. But we all knew the truth. The only thing she regretted was underestimating the guy with the tank. By the next morning, the flattened Lamborghini had become something of a tourist attraction. Word had spread like wildfire. Apparently, someone in the crowd had uploaded a video of the incident online. The title, Karen Gets Tanked Literally. Within hours, it had thousands of views. By morning, it had millions. My driveway was now a viral landmark. People were driving in from nearby towns just to get a look at the wreckage. Karen's prized possession, once her rolling temple of attention, now looked like a crumpled soda can someone had stepped on. The roof had caved in entirely. The once gleaming body panels were shattered, twisted, and bent. Her fancy Italian license plate was lying face down in the grass. Even the custom gold-plated exhaust tips had snapped off. To her credit, or maybe out of stubborn pride, Karen hadn't towed the car away, yet. Maybe she thought it made her look like the victim, a martyr crushed under the wheels of injustice. But the neighborhood wasn't buying it. Not anymore. Neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact with her were now openly laughing. Some waved to me. Others stopped to chat. A few even asked to take selfies with the tank. I said yes to everyone. I knew I'd crossed a line. But the funny thing was, so had she. Repeatedly. And in the eyes of everyone watching, what I'd done wasn't just over the top. It was fair. Poetic. Still, I figured it would be a quiet day after the chaos. I was wrong. Around 11 a.m., Karen returned. She marched down the sidewalk in yoga pants and a rage-fueled stare, phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her voice carried halfway down the block. This is not over. I don't care what the HOA says. I don't care what your little fan club thinks. You ruined my life. I was sitting on my porch, coffee in hand, legs crossed, tank parked proudly in the driveway behind me like a steel sentinel. I didn't flinch. You ruined your own car, I said. I just drove forward. She stormed up to the bottom step of my porch, stopping just shy of trespassing again. Smart for once. You think people are laughing with you? She spat. They're laughing at you. That video's going to make you a joke. A meme. You'll be known as that weirdo tank guy forever. A good. Better than being known as the woman who thought her car made her royalty. Her eyes narrowed. You have no idea who you're messing with. I raised my eyebrows. Karen, I think we've both made that mistake. You thought I was just the quiet guy with weird hobbies. Turns out, I'm the quiet guy with a tank and a legally recorded conversation of you telling me to move it myself. Hey! Oh, I meant with a tow truck. I gave her a half smile. You should have said that. She turned and walked away in a huff, but not before adding one final threat over her shoulder. Enjoy your little moment. Lawyers will be in touch. She wasn't bluffing. A few days later, I received a letter from her attorney, filled with the usual buzzwords: gross negligence, willful destruction, emotional distress, and so on. I passed it to my own lawyer, who responded with a calm, detailed rebuttal. The short version, I was on private property, I had security footage, I had her text messages and recorded audio, and she had no legal right to block my gate. Also, the tank was legally registered, insured, and operated within the bounds of state and local regulations. In other words, her lawsuit had about as much structural integrity as her car's roof. Meanwhile, the HOA had seen enough. 2 days after the incident, they sent out a neighborhood-wide email. It read, in part, "While we do not condone excessive displays of force, we must remind all residents to respect property boundaries, parking regulations, and the safety of others." Effective immediately, Karen M. is suspended from all HOA activities and leadership roles pending a formal vote. It was the HOA version of an exile notice, and it worked. Karen's reign ended not with a speech or a scandal, but with the slow, sad scrape of a flatbed tow truck hauling her wrecked Lambo away while the neighbors watched in silence. No one clapped. No one offered condolences. Everyone just stood there, quietly acknowledging that the chapter was finally closed. She moved out 3 weeks later. No goodbye, no apology, just a for sale sign on her front lawn and the sudden absence of engine roars every morning. The woman who once treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom disappeared without a word. In the weeks that followed, the mood on the block shifted. Kids started riding bikes again without fear of getting yelled at for unsafe behavior. Porch lights were strung up without anonymous fines. Holiday decorations returned. People were smiling more, talking more. And me? I got a thank you card from the Patel family. A bottle of whiskey from Sam next door. Even Mrs. Ellison, who hadn't left her porch in months, gave me a wink and said, "You're the reason I believe in karma. Again. The tank stayed parked in my driveway for a little longer, mostly because people kept asking to see it, but eventually I rolled it back to the garage, gave it a fresh coat of paint, and parked it for the next time I might need to defend my driveway. Karen underestimated a lot of people. She underestimated decency, boundaries, and the importance of respecting others. But mostly, she underestimated the guy with a tank. The sun had barely risen when I stepped outside with my coffee and saw what had replaced the wrecked Lamborghini. Where the crushed supercar had once sat in all its golden, twisted glory was now a clean driveway. No glass shards. No bits of carbon fiber. No flattened tires or Lambo logo glinting sadly in the sun. It was just empty. I'd half expected Karen to leave it there for weeks as a monument to her ego and a passive-aggressive statement to the neighborhood. But sometime in the night, a flatbed had hauled it away, quietly, no spectacle, no screaming, no crowd. I didn't even hear it happen, but even in its absence, the car's ghost lingered. People still slowed down as they passed. Some still came by just to take pictures of the now famous tank, which I'd parked off to the side, safely away from the main drive. And every few hours, I'd hear another retelling of the story from a neighbor walking their dog, or a teenager quoting the video that had now crossed 10 million views. I had become a meme. Apparently, I was now known online as a tank guy, a HOA hammer, and my personal favorite, a Karen's final boss. There were remixes, animations, and someone even made a shirt that read, "A move your Lambo or I will." The fame was unexpected, surreal, and weirdly satisfying. But in the neighborhood itself, something more interesting was happening. The silence. Without Karen's presence, the block felt calmer, peaceful. No more unsolicited HOA newsletters printed on thick cards. No more emails about unauthorized porch gnomes or reminders about approved lawn heights. No more condescending notes taped to trash bins or passive-aggressive complaints during block parties. It was like the entire neighborhood had taken a deep breath for the first time in a year. The HOA board, now temporarily chaired by Greg, an accountant who wore socks with sandals and never said more than 4 words at a time, was having emergency meetings. Karen's suspension had been the talk of the last gathering, and rumor had it they were drafting a new policy. No one could hold an HOA leadership role without a neighborhood vote. Shocking, I know. Basic democracy. In this cul-de-sac. Change was happening. Slowly, yes, but it was real. A few days later, I got a formal letter in the mail. Not from Karen this time, from the HOA. Dear resident, the recent incident involving a private vehicle and your personal property has prompted a review of our bylaws. We appreciate your cooperation and restraint during the matter. and we regret that the situation escalated in such a dramatic way. We are working to establish clearer guidelines around parking enforcement and conflict resolution moving forward. Sincerely, HOA Interim Chair, Gregory T. Su. It was short, formal, and hilariously understated, like they were pretending a military-grade vehicle hadn't just steamrolled a Lamborghini on their watch. Still, it was progress, and it made something else clear. They knew Karen was the problem, and they were moving forward without her. The next real shock came about a week after the car was removed. A soul sign appeared on Karen's lawn. No announcement. No open house flyer. Just a simple sign with the local real estate logo planted right next to her perfectly trimmed hedge. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk across the street like curious birds watching a forest fire fizzle out. I didn't join them. I just stood by my gate, sipping my coffee, arms crossed, watching the silent exodus unfold. She didn't come outside that day, but her presence was fading by the hour. Boxes appeared in windows. Movers came and went. Curtains were drawn shut. The once glamorous house with its monthly exterior cleanings and pretentious wreaths started to look like just another building on the block. It was strange, seeing her disappear in stages. One day, it was the Lambo. Then it was the lawn decor. Then the mailbox label was removed. Finally, one afternoon, I saw her, Karen herself, step outside with a single bag slung over her shoulder and sunglasses on. Even though it was cloudy, she didn't look at anyone, didn't wave, didn't yell. No parting shots, no sarcastic commentary. She got in the back of a silver SUV, not hers, and drove away. No one clapped, but no one stopped her either. She left like a ghost who'd finally realized no one was afraid of her anymore. The following week was quiet. Remarkably so. Greg from the HOA came by and knocked on my door just to thank me, which was the first time he'd ever spoken more than 4 words. The Johnsons, who Karen had once fined for using a beach umbrella in their backyard, invited me to their summer BBQ. The Patels offered to help repaint the tank, just for fun. Even Mrs. Cartwright, who had lived on the block for over 20 years and never acknowledged anyone under 60, dropped off banana bread with a sticky note that read, "I voted for the tank." Things changed. Not because a Lamborghini got crushed, but because someone finally stood up to entitlement and did it in a way no one could ignore. Karen tried to make herself untouchable, unquestionable. She used money, rules, and volume as weapons. But in the end, it wasn't a court order or HOA motion that stopped her. It was a man with a tank and the audacity to say a no. By the time the new family moved into Karen's old house, her name had already become a legend, or a warning, depending on who you asked. The real estate agent didn't mention the Lamborghini incident in the listing, of course, but I'm pretty sure anyone who looked up the address on Google figured it out quickly. It had its own search result. They were a young couple, mid-30s maybe, with a toddler and a golden doodle. Normal, friendly. The kind of people who waved first. They brought over cookies the first weekend and introduced themselves as Matt and Elena. I didn't get a strong dictator vibe from either of them, which was a promising start. The neighborhood, still high on its newfound peace, welcomed them like royalty. Not in the way Karen once demanded, but in the way good neighbors do, lending tools, offering recommendations for contractors, and warning them about the raccoons that occasionally raided garbage bins on trash night. No one mentioned the tank incident directly, but I saw Elena do a double take when she first spotted it parked neatly under its tarp near my garage. Matt finally asked one afternoon, "So, is that real?" I smiled. "It depends on your definition of real. It runs. It's legal. It weighs enough to flatten a sports car." He grinned. "I thought that was just an internet story." "Oh, it was," I said. "Still is, actually." He laughed. "Respect. It felt good, normal, even. The fear was gone. The tension, the whispered complaints, the ridiculous weekly memos from the self-appointed queen of suburbia. Gone. Karen had ruled the neighborhood like a petty tyrant, enforcing rules she invented and treating every front lawn like her personal jurisdiction. But once she realized her car, and by extension, her power, wasn't invincible, her control collapsed like the hood of her Lambo. With her gone, Life moved forward, slowly, naturally. HOA meetings turned from battlegrounds into actual discussions. No more EDCOR violation photos being emailed out. No more threats about mailbox color uniformity or lawn gnome bans. Greg, the interim chair, became the permanent chair after an actual vote, unanimous. His first act? Reducing the frequency of HOA meetings to once every 3 months and banning anonymous complaints. People started hosting casual driveway barbecues again. Kids roamed the sidewalks without being shushed. Porch lights stayed up past 10 p.m. without getting warning letters. Halloween decorations appeared in full force that year. Gruesome, hilarious, and gloriously tacky. Even I got into the spirit and added a zombie army crawling out from under the tank's treads. The kids loved it, and I started to realize that the tank, once just a personal hobby and passion project, had taken on a different meaning around here. It wasn't just steel and treads and power. It had become a symbol of boundaries, yes, but also of something more important. It represented standing up, not just against Karen, but against the kind of entitled thinking that poisons communities. The kind that thinks money excuses bad behavior. That power means being above the rules you enforce on others. That silence means consent. It turns out, a tank says a lot without having to say anything. One evening as the sun dipped low and the neighborhood lit up with porch lights and quiet chatter, I sat out on my front steps with a cold drink in hand. Matt and Elena were walking their dog, and across the street, the Johnson twins were racing scooters while their mom waved from the porch. Mrs. Cartwright walked by, slower than most, but with her usual dignified stride. She paused at the base of my driveway and looked over the lawn, then up at the house, then at the tank under the tarp. Under the tarp. You know, she said, I never thought I'd say this, but I think your tank saved this neighborhood. I chuckled. I just wanted to leave my driveway. She gave me one of those stern grandmotherly looks. Don't be modest. You reminded people that rules work both ways. That courtesy matters, and that sometimes you have to roll over a few obstacles to restore peace. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She walked on, without another word. That night, I looked out at the quiet street, the trimmed lawns, the flickering patio lights, and realized just how different everything had become. All because one person finally said, no more, in the loudest, most unexpected way possible. Karen was gone. Her Lambo was probably in a junkyard somewhere, picked apart for scrap and remembered only through memes and YouTube clips. But her departure left behind more than crushed fiberglass. It left behind a community that had found its voice again. And me? I stayed the same guy I'd always been. Quiet. Private. A little weird. But now, when people waved at me, it wasn't just out of politeness. It was with a smile. With respect. The tank stayed parked in its corner, covered and cared for, only uncovered for events or Halloween, or the occasional curious kid who wanted to sit inside. It didn't need to move anymore. Its job was done. But just in case someone ever forgot how to be a decent neighbor again, well, let's just say the driveway's always clear.